The silence in Leo's house was a language I had been studying for 6 days. It wasn't an empty silence. It was filled with the ghosts of his presence. The faint, lingering scent of cedar and bergamot from the cologne he wore. The low hum of the refrigerator he'd probably chosen for its specific, unobtrusive sound. The way the late afternoon light slanted through the window in his workshop, illuminating dust motes dancing over a half-carved block of cherry wood. I had lived a life of quiet observation, and for the past week, Leo, or the space he occupied, had been my singular subject. My brother, Mark, had asked me to house-sit as a favor. His exact words were, "It's a free vacation, Ethan. And Buster loves you." Buster, their golden retriever, did love me, mostly because I was a sucker for his sad, brown eyes and would feed him scraps from the table. The free vacation part was more debatable. Staying in the house of your older brother's best friend, the man you've been hopelessly, secretly in love with since you were 15, was less a vacation and more a special kind of self-inflicted torture. Leo was supposed to be in Oregon for 2 weeks for a furniture-making conference, an artisan's retreat. It was the only reason I'd agreed. The thought of being in his space, breathing his air, without the crushing pressure of his actual, physical presence was a temptation I couldn't resist. It was a safe way to feel close to him. He'd stopped by the day before Mark and his wife left, dropping off a case of beer as a thank you. He stood in the entryway, all easy confidence and casual strength. He was broader than I remembered from Christmas, his shoulders filling out the worn fabric of his Henley. There were deeper lines around his eyes when he smiled, crinkles that spoke of laughter and long days spent squinting in his workshop. His voice, a low, pleasant rumble that I felt more than heard, washed over me. "You'll take good care of the old place, Ethan?" he'd asked, a playful glint in his dark eyes. "And the old dog." I'd managed, my own voice sounding thin and reedy in comparison. He'd laughed, a real, hearty sound. Then he'd reached out and squeezed my shoulder. A simple, friendly gesture he'd done 100 times over the years. But this time, it felt different. His hand was warm and heavy, the pressure deliberate. It lingered for a fraction of a second too long, a tiny pause in the rhythm of our usual dynamic. Or maybe I imagined it. With Leo, I was never sure. My entire adolescence was a catalog of such moments, tiny scraps of ambiguous affection that I would hoard and analyze for weeks. A lingering look, a shared glance across a crowded room, his knee brushing mine under the dinner table. For 6 days, I had been a ghost in his life. I slept in the guest room, but in the quiet hours of the night, I would walk the halls. I'd trace the spines of the books on his shelves, collections of poetry, biographies of artists, worn paperback thrillers. I ran my hand over the smooth, cool surface of the dining table he'd built, the joints so perfect they seemed to have grown that way. One afternoon, I stood in his workshop for an hour, just breathing in the scent of sawdust and varnish. It smelled like him, like effort and creation. It felt more intimate than reading someone's diary. I was learning the man from the shape of his absence. I learned he drank his coffee black from a heavy ceramic mug. I learned he listened to old soul music while he cooked. I learned he left his boots by the back door, scuffed and coated in a fine layer of dust. These small, domestic details were weaving a new image of him in my mind, overlaying the idealized version I'd carried for so long. He was becoming less of a god and more of a man, a transformation that was both terrifying and deeply comforting. On the 7th night, I was curled on his sofa, wrapped in a thick wool blanket that smelled faintly of him and campfire smoke. Buster was asleep on the rug, his leg twitching as he chased dream rabbits. I was halfway through a black-and-white movie, the kind Leo seemed to favor, full of long shadows and morally gray men. My eyes were heavy. The house was finally starting to feel like a refuge rather than a museum of my unrequited feelings. I was safe here. He was 1,000 miles away. I must have drifted off. The sound that woke me was the quiet click of a key in the front door. My heart seized. My first thought was a burglar. I sat bolt upright, clutching the blanket to my chest. Buster lifted his head, let out a low woof, and then his tail began to thump a frantic, happy rhythm against the floor. The door opened, and a silhouette filled the frame, backlit by the porch light. It was tall and broad-shouldered. My breath caught in my throat. "Hey, buddy," a low voice rumbled. Leo's voice. He stepped inside, dropping a duffel bag to the floor with a heavy thud. He bent down to scratch Buster's ears, and the dog whined with pure joy. Then he straightened up, and his eyes found me on the couch. I was frozen, a deer caught in the headlights of my own mortifying crush. "Ethan," he didn't sound surprised, just tired. He ran a hand through his already messy hair. "Conference got cut short. Supply chain issues, don't ask." "Oh," was all I could manage. My mind was a frantic blur. He was home, a week early. He was standing in his own living room, looking at me tangled in his blanket on his couch. The comfortable silence I had come to know was shattered, replaced by a humming, electric tension. "Sorry if I scared you," he said, his gaze lingering on me. It wasn't an accusatory look. It was something else, something I couldn't decipher. Observant. Perceptive. "It's okay. I was just watching a movie." My voice was a croak. He nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the room as if reacquainting himself with it. "Don't let me stop you. I'm just gonna grab a shower. Long day." He disappeared down the hall, and I was left with the sound of my own frantic heartbeat. He was home. The thought repeated itself, a drumbeat of panic and a strange, unwelcome thrill. The safe bubble had burst. The subject of my decade-long study was here, in the flesh, and I was trapped in the laboratory with him. I heard the shower start, a distant hiss of water. I should leave. I should pack my bag, call a cab, and flee into the night. It was the sane, rational thing to do. My job here was done, but my feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. The idea of walking out that door, of leaving the warmth of this house and the proximity to him, felt like a physical impossibility. So I stayed. I folded the blanket and placed it neatly on the arm of the sofa. I turned off the television. I made sure the back door was locked. I went about the small, domestic tasks as if I belonged there, as if my presence wasn't a complication, as if my heart wasn't trying to beat its way out of my chest. I retreated to the guest room, my temporary sanctuary. I closed the door, but it felt like a flimsy shield. I could hear him moving around now, the quiet opening and closing of drawers, the soft thud of his footsteps on the hardwood floor. Every sound was magnified, intimate. He was just on the other side of the wall. I changed into a pair of sweatpants and an old t-shirt, my hands trembling slightly. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening. Just listening. The house was settling back into a different kind of silence now, a shared silence. It was infinitely more complex and charged than the one I had known when I was alone. This quiet was aware. It was breathing. A soft knock on the door made me jump. "Ethan." Leo's voice was muffled. I swallowed hard. "Yeah." The door opened a few inches. He was leaning against the frame, wearing a pair of gray sweatpants and a faded black t-shirt. His hair was damp from the shower, curling slightly at the ends. He smelled clean, like soap and warm skin. The sight of him so casual, so unguarded, did something strange to my insides. "Couldn't sleep," he said. It wasn't a question. I shook my head, unable to form words. He didn't move from the doorway. He just stood there, watching me. His gaze was steady, intense. It felt like he was seeing right through the carefully constructed walls I had spent years building. He wasn't just looking at me. He was reading me. "Me neither," he finally said, his voice low. My head still on Oregon time. We sat in that silence for a long moment. Him in the doorway, me on the bed. The space between us felt both vast and infinitesimally small. It was filled with everything we had never said, all the years of shared history seen from our two vastly different perspectives. His, as my brother's best friend, mine, as the kid who had watched him from the sidelines, hopelessly devoted. "You know," he began, his voice dropping even lower, becoming more serious. He pushed off the doorframe, but didn't step into the room. He just shifted his weight, a subtle change in posture that felt significant. I wasn't entirely honest. "About what?" I asked, my own voice barely a whisper. "The conference." He looked down at his feet for a second, then his eyes met mine again. They were dark and serious. It wasn't cut short. I left early, my brow furrowed in confusion. "Why?" He held my gaze. The air grew thick, heavy. I could hear the clock ticking on the nightstand. I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. "Because I kept thinking about you being here," he said, and the words landed in the quiet room with the force of a physical blow. In my house, alone, my world tilted on its axis. It couldn't be what it sounded like. It was a misunderstanding. He was worried about me, That's all. The protective older brother role he'd always played. You didn't need to worry, I said, trying for a casual tone and failing miserably. Buster and I were holding down the fort. A small, sad smile touched his lips. I wasn't worried, Ethan. He took a step into the room. Then another. He stopped a few feet from the bed, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, close enough that the scent of his soap was a tangible presence. He wasn't smiling anymore. His expression was one of raw, unguarded seriousness. It was an expression I had never seen on him before. "Why are you always so nervous around me?" he asked, the question soft but incredibly direct. It was the one question I had spent my life dreading. There was no escape, no witty deflection, no brotherly banter to hide behind, just the stark, terrifying truth hanging in the air between us. My throat closed up. All the years of carefully guarded feelings, of silent pining and hopeless longing, were cresting like a tidal wave. I looked down at my hands, twisted in the fabric of my sweatpants. "I'm not," I lied weakly. "Look at me," he said. It wasn't a command, but a quiet plea. Slowly, I lifted my head. His eyes were full of a strange, pained understanding. It was the look of a man who had finally solved a puzzle that had been bothering him for a very long time. "It's okay," he whispered. And that's what broke me. Not a demand or a confession, but those two simple words. Permission. Acceptance. A wave of something hot and sharp pricked at the back of my eyes. "I don't know how to be any other way around you," I admitted, the words tumbling out, hushed and broken. "I've tried. For years, I've tried." He closed the remaining distance between us in a single, fluid movement. He sat on the bed, not beside me, but in front of me, his knees almost touching mine. He didn't touch me. Not yet. He just sat there, letting my confession settle in the space between us. "Since when?" he asked, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. I let out a shaky breath that was half laugh, half sob. "Since always, Leo. It feels like always." He reached out then, his hand moving slowly, as if giving me time to pull away. He didn't touch my face or my shoulder. He gently took one of my hands. His fingers were warm and slightly rough, calloused from his work. He laced his fingers with mine, his thumb stroking softly over my knuckles. It was the most definitive, unambiguous touch he had ever given me. It wasn't a friendly squeeze or a brotherly pat. It was a connection, a statement. My heart is going to explode. The thought is so clear, so loud, I'm half surprised I didn't say it aloud. I look from our joined hands to his face. His eyes are searching mine, full of questions. "Ethan," he says, my name a quiet prayer. I think I've been a damn fool." He leans in, and the world narrows to the space between our lips. His other hand comes up to cup my jaw, his thumb stroking the line of my cheekbone. His touch is feather-light, questioning. He's giving me every chance to say no, to turn away. I don't. I lean into his touch, closing my eyes. And then he kisses me. It's nothing like I had imagined in 1,000 secret daydreams. It's not frantic or desperate. It's slow. It's careful. It's a question and an answer all at once. His lips are soft, warm. There's the faint taste of minty toothpaste and something that is just purely, undeniably him. It's a kiss of discovery, of years of unspoken things finally finding a voice. When he pulls back, it's only an inch. Our foreheads rest together. I can feel his breath on my skin, warm and even. My own breathing is a ragged mess. "Okay," he whispers, his thumb still stroking my cheek. I let out a shuddering breath and nod, because words have completely abandoned me. My hand is still laced with his, a warm, solid anchor in the swirling chaos of my emotions. This is real. This is happening. He kisses me again, and this time it's deeper. It's firmer. There's a decade of curiosity in it, a decade of missed signals and misunderstood moments. It's a kiss that says, "So this is what it's like. I should have done this a long time ago." I kiss him back with all the pent-up yearning of a boy who has loved a man from afar for half his life. It's clumsy and honest and overwhelming. It is the single most terrifying and wonderful thing I have ever experienced. He doesn't leave my room. He stays. We don't talk much more that night. Words feel inadequate, clumsy. Instead, we lie down on the bed, on top of the covers, still fully dressed. He pulls me against his side, his arm wrapping around my shoulders, holding me close. I rest my head on his chest, right over his heart. Its rhythm is as steady and solid as the rest of him. I match my breathing to his, and for the first time in as long as I can remember, the frantic, anxious energy inside me begins to quiet. The silence in the room is no longer charged with tension, but filled with a profound and peaceful sense of rightness. I fall asleep to the sound of his heart beating under my ear, feeling like I've finally come home. I woke to the unsettling feeling of being alone. The space beside me in the bed was cool. The weight of his arm was gone. I sat up, my heart instantly kicking into a familiar, panicked rhythm. The guest room door was closed. Sunlight streamed through the gap in the curtains, indicating it was morning. A deep, hollow dread pooled in my stomach. He'd left. He regretted it. Last night was a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment brought on by travel fatigue and a dimly lit room. I was the convenient, emotionally available fool who had been right there. The narrative wrote itself in my head with cruel efficiency. I buried my face in my hands, the scent of his soap still clinging to my t-shirt, a phantom reminder of what I'd probably already lost. I felt sick. I stayed in that bed for what felt like an hour, paralyzed by my own spiraling thoughts. Every scenario was a catastrophe. The awkward breakfast, the pitying look in his eyes, the gentle but firm, "Ethan, about last night." I couldn't face it. Maybe I could just pack my things and slip out before he even saw me. It would be cowardly, but it would be less painful than seeing the regret on his face. Just as I was steeling myself to make a run for it, there was a soft knock on the door. The same knock as last night. My stomach plummeted. "Ethan," Leo's voice. It was quiet, impossible to read. I couldn't answer. I just stared at the door, holding my breath. The door opened slowly. He was standing there, holding two mugs. He was wearing jeans and a clean t-shirt, and his hair was still slightly damp. He looked calm. His eyes found mine, and for a second, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in them, a mirror of my own fear. He walked into the room and held one of the mugs out to me. "I made coffee," he said, his voice even. I took it from him, my fingers brushing against his. The contact sent a jolt through me. I mumbled a thank you, keeping my eyes fixed on the dark liquid in the mug. I couldn't look at him. He didn't leave. He sat on the edge of the bed, the same way he had last night, leaving a careful foot of space between us. The silence stretched, thick with morning after awkwardness. This was it. The speech was coming. "I woke up," he said, his voice low and gravelly. And for a second, I thought I'd dreamed it. I risked a glance at him. He was staring into his own mug, his expression thoughtful. He wasn't looking at me with pity. He continued, "Then I realized you were still here, and I felt calm." He finally turned his head and met my gaze. His eyes were clear, direct. I haven't felt calm like that in a long time. The knot of anxiety in my chest loosened, just a fraction. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it wasn't a rejection, either. It was something small and quiet and honest. It was reassurance. "I thought you regretted it." I confessed, the words quiet. A faint line appeared between his brows. "Regret it? Ethan, I flew home a week early on the off chance that something like last night might happen. The only thing I regret is that I waited 10 years to do it." My breath hitched. 10 years. He hadn't just figured this out last night. This wasn't a whim. The thought was so staggering, so world-altering, that I couldn't process it. "But, Mark," I said, the name of my brother feeling like the one great obstacle we could never overcome. "He's your best friend." "He is," Leo agreed, nodding. "And he's your brother. And he loves us both. He wants us to be happy." "Is it going to be a weird conversation?" "Yeah, probably. But I'd rather have one weird conversation with Mark than spend another 10 years wondering what if." He set his mug down on the nightstand and turned to face me fully. He took my coffee from my trembling hands and set it beside his. Then he took both of my hands in his. "I'm not a kid anymore, Ethan," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "I'm not confused. I know what I want. The question is, what do you want?" The internal test. My own doubt rose up, a lifetime of insecurity whispering in my ear. Was this real? Could I trust this feeling? Could I trust him? Was I brave enough to want something I had been told my whole life was out of reach? I looked at our hands, his strong and sure, holding mine. I looked at his face, at the earnest, hopeful, slightly anxious expression in his eyes. He wasn't the untouchable idol of my youth anymore. He was a man, sitting on a bed in the morning light, offering me a future I had never dared to imagine for myself. He was vulnerable. He was waiting for my answer. And in that moment, the fear that had been my constant companion for so long finally receded. It was replaced by something new, something quiet and steady. Hope. I want this, I said, my voice clear and sure for the first time. I want to stop wondering what if. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming it, making him look younger. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated relief. He squeezed my hands. Good, he said softly. That's good. We didn't kiss then. The moment felt too important for that. It was a quiet agreement. A conscious choice. We were going to figure this out. Together. Later, we were in the kitchen. I was making toast while he scrambled eggs. Buster was lying on the floor between us, sighing contentedly. It was so simple, so domestic. The sunlight streamed into the room, illuminating the comfortable, lived-in space. It felt less like I was a guest in his house and more like we were building a new kind of home right there, in that moment. He slid the eggs onto 2 plates and brought them to the small breakfast table. I followed with the toast and 2 more cups of coffee. We sat opposite each other, the silence easy and comfortable now. As I took a bite of my eggs, I watched him. I watched the way he held his fork, the way he looked at me over the rim of his coffee mug, a small, private smile playing on his lips. All those years, I had been an observer, watching him from a distance, collecting meaningless data points, and trying to assemble them into a picture I could understand. Now, I wasn't on the outside anymore. I was here, inside the frame with him. He reached across the table and his hand found mine, his fingers lacing with mine on the smooth wood surface. It felt natural, right? I was no longer the lonely boy cataloging the life of his brother's best friend. I was a man, holding the hand of the man I loved, who, by some impossible miracle, loved me back. The years of quiet yearning hadn't been a waste. They had been a long, slow path leading me right here, to this sunlit kitchen, to this quiet breakfast, to the start of everything. I looked at our joined hands, then up at his face, and I smiled. The feeling was profound, a deep, resonant peace. It felt like I'd finally stopped running. It felt like I'd come home.